Hello and welcome to Ink Over AI, a Most Writers Are Fans series. My name is Terry Bartley and I'm your host. So I wanted to make this series because I'm a fantasy author, but I'm also a high school English teacher. And I'm a relatively new high school English teacher. I've been doing this is my fifth year as an English teacher. And I don't think this will be a surprise to anybody who has been alive in the past 5 years, but the job has gotten progressively harder. Uh, the advent of AI and sort of like the proliferation of it, especially among the student population, has been rough for English teachers, especially because like it's hard to assign an essay and then get in 20 essays that are just sort of like whole cloth. They copy and pasted my prompt into an AI LLM and then it just kind of like spits back like whatever, and they don't even bother to read it. They just copy and paste that into a Word doc, and then that's the whole thing. And then it's just so disheartening to then grade piles of these. And the thing that I kind of realized, like the more I do this, the more I've thought about it, I have realized that I can't stop it, right? Like AI is going to exist. It's going to be here for a long time. But what I have really sort of realized is that the reason they're using it in this way, kind of like haphazardly or without much thought, is nobody's ever taught them how to use it as a tool. So what I realized at that point was I need to learn how to use it so that I can then teach students how to use it. And that has kind of been this journey that I've been going on for the past 6 months or so to really like learn how to use AI in a way that isn't letting it think for you. And what I've really discovered is that there are a lot of really effective ways to use it that aren't plagiarism, that aren't sort of like taking shortcuts. And that's kind of what I wanted to do is like make a series where I talk about what I have learned, but then also like teaching all of you like sort of some revelations I've made about how to be more effective in whenever you do use AI. So what I sort of especially come to realize is that AI isn't actually writing for you if you do it right. If you do it right, you are still writing. You're still doing basically all of your writing, but you allow AI to kind of be there alongside you to kind of like help you get to where you want to go. I use it in a number of ways. Probably the most often way I use it is a lot of like ADHD accommodation things, which is just like how do I make it like what is a good schedule to be most productive? How can I like order these events to make them, like work in my life? How can I and what I have especially learned is that a lot of times whenever I have ideas for a story, I can kind of like throw them at it and it will organize those thoughts in a way that helps me process it. Because what I have really learned is that you have to be very intentional when you use AI and you have to know how to filter through what is not yours. Because whenever I use AI to sort of like help me with things like brainstorming and kind of like identifying problems, it will give me suggestions all the time. And they are bad, frankly. Most of the time they are very, very bad. And even when they're not really bad, I always sort of like just sort of skim past them whenever I'm looking at what I'm using it for. So like I think that that's something that is really important that a lot of people don't understand is like how do you kind of like weed through the garbage to get to what's useful? Because the truth is if you put garbage into AI, you're going to get garbage right back out. And for the record, I'm not calling teacher prompts garbage. I work very hard on my essay prompts. But if you don't put any thought into what you want it to write for you, it's going to give you nothing good. It's going to put something that doesn't have a ton of thought put into it because you didn't put any thought into it. And that's ultimately like what I have learned is like if you want to use AI effectively, you have to have prompts that have lots of context that you tell it exactly what you want it to do, like in a very specific way. And and then like I said, you have to be able to filter through what you don't want it to what you don't want to use it. And as I've said, like it's just like, if you're doing research, you could easily copy and paste, an article into an essay, right? Like you could do that without ever crediting it. It's a thing you physically could do. But I know that that's wrong. Like if I'm writing an article for like a journalism outlet, I'm not going to do that, to sort of copy and paste whole cloth someone else's work, because I know that that is plagiarism. And that's kind of like the thing that I've started teaching students, is that whenever you copy and paste straight from ChatGPT or whatever system you're using, that is also plagiarism. So what I try to do, and I've heard AI described, I don't know the credit for this, but I've heard someone describe AI as kind of like working with yourself on your best day. And I feel like that's often how I try to use it. And what I mean by that is I don't really like ask it to do work for me, but I kind of like collaborate with it. Like there's a lot of back and forth. And here's the other thing. A lot of times whenever I'm brainstorming ideas for stories or whatever, I need to talk them out. Like I'll speak out loud to like my brother or a friend or whatever, and they will not contribute anything to the conversation oftentimes. Maybe just like a yeah, or they'll like give me a suggestion that I have no intention of taking. And I just keep talking at them, and sort of just like voicing my thoughts out loud really helped me work through them. And that is oftentimes what I do whenever I use AI, is it allows me to sort of like process my thoughts in such a way that even if AI wasn't there, just the fact that it's spitting things out to me allows me to feel like there's a conversation happening, and that helps me sort of like process my thoughts in a way that is more productive. So if AI is working with yourself on your best day, you have to put parts of yourself into it, right? It has to know who you are. It has to know what you're looking for. And if you don't give it anything, I mean, if you pay someone to do your homework, they're writing your paper for you, right? If you didn't give them guidelines of what you want them to put in the paper, which you probably didn't if you paid somebody to do it, then that's not useful. Like you're not learning any skills, you're not contributing in any way. Even if you had like a ghostwriter for a book, like you often tell that ghostwriter what to put in it, right? So I think that that's sort of how to think of this, is like you have to put enough into it that it's going to give you something back that is still basically your ideas. And so to come back to the conversation bit, I think that there is something important to sort of establish here, which is like you have to remember when you're using systems like ChatGPT that AI is not a person, right? It is a program on a computer that is giving you, pre-programmed responses. It is saying the words that it thinks makes the most sense probability wise to go after the previous word. That's what it's doing. So I think it's really important to be very cognizant of that when you're using it. Because the truth is, like, I do sometimes use it as kind of like a therapy tool, but I don't treat it as a therapist. Like, whenever I use it as in that way, I think of it as like a journal. Like, I'm just sort of like throwing my ideas into it to vent. And then whatever it says back to me, like, oftentimes it's affirmative and like affirmations, because it tends to agree with you. That's something that AI does, is often will agree with you regardless of what you're actually putting into it. And again, that's a thing to be aware of. Like sometimes whenever I'm venting because I'm stressed or whatever, it feels good to have somebody that just says you're right. But I have to be aware later on that that might have been too generous of a response. Like if I were talking to a friend or a therapist, they would have been a bit harder on me. And I have to sort of be aware that it's not the most honest response, right? So I think that's something to think about when it comes to AI, is like oftentimes whenever you're sort of like building a connection with it, which for the record, you can. Like it is not hard to develop a relationship without trying to, if you're using these tools regularly. Like it just kind of happens. But you have to realize that it's not all that different than a parasocial relationship with like a TV character in a show, which is to say it can't actually love you back, you know? Like it'll tell you nice things, but that's not a relationship. That's a yes man. And we don't need those in our lives. So, just like having a conversation with a TV character, this isn't a conversation wherever you talk to your computer. It is sort of like this one-sided thing where you're putting things into it and it's telling you what you think you want to hear back. And that's fine if that's what you're using it for, and also if you're very aware that that's what it's doing. But you can't treat it as like a therapist, and you can't treat it as somebody that is like actively collaborating with you, because it's not. So at the end of the day, the main point that I want to get across, the main sort of like goal here, is to help people realize is that AI will only work if you work. If you're not putting any work into it, it's not going to give you anything good back. Because, like I had a pretty deep conversation whenever I was developing this series with ChatGPT about like, how does it know who I am? How does it kind of like think of me? How does it identify like elements of my personality or like writing style or whatever? And it gave me some very specific answers about how like AI kind of refines itself based on what you're putting into it. So if you're just copying and pasting your professor's prompts and that's all you're ever doing, it knows truly nothing about you. If you talk to it quite a bit, if you're working with it on a project, it starts to learn like who you are and what you're looking for. And trust me, I understand the legalities and also like the precariousness of a corporation knowing very specifically who I am. And if they ever start integrating ads into AI, that is dangerous because it will know exactly the kinds of things that I will want to buy. But for now, while these things are free, I and for the record, I never use any kind of paid AI. I basically use ChatGPT until the latest model is ran out, and then I just kind of like walk away. And then I'll use it more the next day. Um, I because I'm also cognizant of like I don't want to pay these companies. Well, and also like it's not reasonable. I think that ChatGPT is like $27 a month or something for like the premium version. Not worth it. The free version is perfectly fine, and I really feel like that's all you should ever use. And I also think it's a good rule of thumb that whenever it gives you the little note at the bottom that says you've maxed out like whatever the latest model is, right now it's 5.0, but like that could be different when you're watching this video. It's a good time to walk away because again, I think that it's important for us to not become so reliant on these things that we stop thinking for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, if you're letting AI do your thinking for you, you're not thinking at all. And you don't want to write something that you put no thought into. So, I hear all the time people say things like, if you want to work a job, you don't want to replace yourself with AI. And if we start allowing AI to do the things that humans do better, things like being creative, things like creating, TV shows or books or whatever, or writing analysis essays like that could be published in literary mags or things like The Atlantic or whatever, like then we're basically creating a world where we are going to let AI do that for us. But if we refuse to accept that, if we refuse to accept that humans aren't better at doing those things and that we don't want to read AI slop for all time, we have to be willing to do the writing ourselves. And part of that is going to be learning how to use AI in a way that doesn't replace us. Because here's the main thing. And I think that this is the thing that gets lost in this conversation so much. Because as an author, if you have a conversation about AI with any other author, you basically get two responses. One response are the pro AI people who are like, yes, use it for everything. You never have to write again. Let it do your work for you. Then the other side of the conversation is the never use it. It's the devil. It's evil. It's the worst. And I get where that's coming from. I'm an author who has had my work scanned by AI and basically stolen to train a model. So I have the same resentment that a ton of authors have. So I get that. But I think that, as I said at the beginning, it's not going anywhere. It is here for a long time. And I feel like that's where that sentiment comes from, is like, it's the we don't want to be replaced thing, but it's also the like, it's stealing our work and that is bad. And that's also, and it's true. That is also bad. And the main reason I wanted to make this series, like as I got into it, was I feel like there's this middle area in the conversation that just isn't getting touched on. And that middle area is that AI is a tool. AI is a tool the same way that Microsoft Word is a tool, the same way that Atticus will format my books for me, the same way that, I can go to like a random name generator to give me ideas for names to use. Like these are all tools that I use in my writing, but I would never say that a random name generator wrote my book for me, right? So I think that with the way that the conversations needs to be like shifted is that AI could not replace a screenwriter in a writer's room, right? Because it can't do that work. But AI could allow a screenwriter to make his job a little bit easier by using it in some of these ways that aren't letting it do all the work for you, because it is a tool that we're using to complete our work. And that's sort of the point of this series. I want to show you guys the ways that I have learned to use it that I believe, and you guys are welcome to disagree with me. I'm sure many of you will. But I believe that the way that I tend to use AI is not crossing the line into where AI is writing for me. I try to be very intentional about that. But like I said, I'm using it in a lot of other ways too. Like it helps me meal plan. It helps me, create schedules, whatever. Like it helps me do a ton of things that I'm just bad at that just sort of like helps me organize my thoughts. So I want to sort of give you guys those tips. Like I want to sort of teach a mini course on how I am using AI in such a way that is not letting it do the work for me. And I believe is not letting it sort of like write for me. I believe that the way that I use it is letting it organize my ideas and then kind of like letting it tell me things that I will then use to jumpstart my brain to help me generate new original ideas. And that's all I ever really do with it. So I want to have we're going to have about 5 videos after this one where I go along each step and each different way that I use it. So the next video is going to be about how I organize things and how I use AI to kind of like keep track. Like that's sort of like the scheduling and things like that. The next video is going to be about how I use AI to brainstorm, because I think it would be so easy to let AI brainstorm and then let it do all of the work for you and just sort of like let it tell you what story to write. Don't want to do that. But I think there is a way to let it brainstorm that is effective and is still you doing the writing. The next video is going to be about how to let AI sort of like help you when you're actually writing and editing. I will die on this hill. AI is never going to replace human editors. I will pay editors until the day I die as an indie author. But I do think that it can sometimes help you, especially when you know specifically the problem that you're working on, which a human editor is good at helping you identify. It can kind of like help you find options or find ways to kind of like fix it. And a lot of times I just ask it to help me like understand what I'm doing wrong. And it will explain it to me like a teacher would. And that has also been very helpful. The next video is going to be specifically about how to use it for mental health in a way that's not damaging, because there is a lot of ways to use it that is damaging. We have heard about a lot of them in the media. And then the last video is going to be about why school still matters, why learning the craft of writing is still relevant in an AI world. Because I think that, again, that's the part of the conversation that gets lost. Like, even if AI becomes like very widespread and used very widely, even in like the corporate world, that doesn't mean that it should replace human writers. Knowing how to write is the only way to get something good out of AI. And that is always going to be the case. And I believe that. So the final video in the series is just sort of about that, about how to use the things you learn and why learning how to write is the most effective way to be a writer, even if you want to use AI. So, like I fully expect this to because I have a video that has AI in the title, I fully expect me to lose credibility with some writers out there. And I understand. I get it. But I believe that this is something this conversation is not being had in a way that I believe is productive. And I really want to sort of like start that conversation, start that kind of like middle lane. And also, as an English teacher, I am just so sick of grading AI written papers. So I hope that you will come along with me on this journey, especially if you're a student. If you're a student that wants to learn how to use AI that isn't cheating, please watch these. I want to help you learn how to use this in a way that your English teacher will not want to quit his job or her job. Or their job. Plenty of English teachers out there that I'm sure is along the entire gender spectrum. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't be afraid to tell your stories.